Greetings all, I'm Aaron Mills, and welcome back to Legacy of the Pink Panther, a 12-part retrospective on the films and cartoons of the Pink Panther franchise. Last time we talked about the Pink Panther Strikes Again and how the relationship between Peter Sellers and Blake Edwards was deteriorating rapidly, much like Peter Sellers' own health, both physically and mentally. In fact, Peter Sellers hated the Pink Panther Strikes Again so much, he accused Edwards of misusing his talents, and pretty much demanded a lot more influence over any more films going forward. Sadly, this time I don't really have a lot of information as to how the next film came to be, aside from the usual Hollywood answer of, the last film made money, so let's make another one. What is generally known is that by this point, Peter Sellers' health was rapidly declining, and he had firmly gathered a reputation of being impossible to work with on set, and his relationship with Blake Edwards at this time was extremely tumultuous. So much so that the next film in the series would be announced as a Sellers-Edwards production as a sop to Sellers' ego. What no one could have realized, of course, was that the next movie would in fact be the last one that Peter Sellers would be around to star in. And coincidentally enough, it's all about Clouseau's supposed death. So, let's take a look at Peter Sellers' final on-set performance in Revenge of the Pink Panther. The film opens in a vaguely Godfather-esque way as a gangster played by Robert Loggia.
Whoa, Robert Loggia!
Thank you. Anyway, Loggia is playing Al Marchione, who is apparently the go-between for his New York boss, and Philippe Duvier, the French connection, played by Robert Webber. Marchione reports that some sort of transaction Duvier had made arrangements for is off because his boss doesn't think Duvier is strong anymore.
You tell him he had better keep his word. Tell him the 25th, as agreed. I'll send him a sign, a little demonstration, to prove that I'm still strong.
Duvier has a meeting with his enforcers, being eavesdropped on by his secretary and mistress, Simone Legree, played by Diane Cannon. And yes, you get points if you just recognize the Uncle Tom's Cabin reference. There they try to figure out what sort of sign to send to New York, and one idea in particular stands out.
Who has given us nothing but trouble for the past 10 years? Who has survived 16 assassination attempts, including 2 by his own boss?
Clouseau.
You want to impress New York? Eliminate Clouseau.
Can you do it smart?
Yes.
Then do it.
Of course, since this is Clouseau we're talking about, smart is nowhere on the menu. After the obligatory animated opening titles, we see Clouseau entering the shop of his chief disguise maker, Professor Auguste Balls. Outside, we see members of Duvier's gang watching him. Inside the shop, Clouseau tries on a new disguise.
Magnificent. Even though I say so myself, this is no small feat. Now you can work the left bank and Montmartre with anonymity.
Because sure, no one's gonna notice Toulouse-Lautrec hanging out at a crime scene. As he walks around in the new disguise, he's handed a bomb by one of Duvier's goons.
Special delivery, a burn. Were you expecting one? A burn?
What's the matter?
Well, the bomb destroyed half the block and Clouseau survived.
Clouseau makes his report to the commissioner, who suggests that the bomb might have been the work of one Claude Rousseau, an armed robber who targets his victims while dressed as a woman.
Well, sir, I must be off to apprehend this mad villain now.
And remember, it just could be Rousseau.
Yes, it just could be Rousseau, yes.
Yes, I just said that.
Yes, I know that, yes, sir. Well, sir, until we meet again and the case is solved. Au revoir, Hercule.
Ah!
Okay, I take it back. Under the right circumstances, it seems that nobody will notice Toulouse-Lautrec at all. Meanwhile, Duvier is given another option as to how to kill Clouseau.
Mr. Chong was recommended by Hong Kong. Gentlemen, fulfill your contracts.
Fun fact here, Mr. Chong is played by Ed Parker, founder of the martial arts school of American Kenpo. And he's here in this movie largely because Blake Edwards was one of his students at the time. Clouseau returns home, but before the obligatory fight with Kato, Mr. Chong breaks into the building, and when Clouseau tries to locate Kato and call off the attack, he spots Mr. Chong from behind, assumes it's Kato, and attacks, sending Mr. Chong off the balcony and through a skylight into the next building, and then through 2 more floors. Kato then makes his move, but before things can really get started, they're interrupted by the phone. Duvier is on the other end, where he tells Clouseau that if he wants to catch the French Connection, he should be at a certain location that night. Oh, come on! Even Clouseau isn't dumb enough to fall for that! It's so obvious it would have to be a trap!
It's so obvious it could not possibly be a trap.
Okay then. Moving on. On his way to the rendezvous, Clouseau picks up a woman on the side of the road in need of assistance, but it turns out the woman is, in fact, Claude Rousseau, who makes Clouseau pull off the side of the road and trade clothes with him. In actuality, Rousseau is played by actress Sue Lloyd, which means we have a woman playing a man who is impersonating a woman. That sounds really familiar for some reason. Meanwhile, Duvier's latest gang of thugs set up a detour which Rousseau takes right into a hail of gunfire and in turn straight into a telephone pole, which causes the car to explode, killing Rousseau in the process. Duvier gets a report that the attack was successful, and Clouseau is mistakenly arrested as Rousseau. Word goes out that Clouseau's dead, and the commissioner is tasked with solving the alleged Clouseau murder quickly. And there's only one man for the job.
Isn't it fantastic, Doctor? Reinstated at my former rank, with no loss of pay or social benefits. Yeah.
Yes, kids, here's what I've been preparing you for. The biggest continuity glitch in this entire series. Dreyfus is alive and back in the mental hospital. And no, we get absolutely no explanation for this. You're just gonna have to roll with it. As it so happens, Clouseau is taken to the same hospital, whether for claiming to be a publicly dead man or for currently being a transvestite is never clarified. Clouseau manages to make a break for it while the paperwork is being done and hides in a room which just so happens to belong to Dreyfus.
Peekaboo.
Your car's at the entrance, Inspector.
Clouseau takes Dreyfus's hat, coat, and suitcase and manages to leave the hospital. Francois takes Clouseau home, where it turns out that Kato has, in a very short time, turned the apartment into a brothel. After some not very funny shenanigans involving Clouseau being mistaken for a client, he finally gets a chance to be alone with Kato and comes to a realization.
Someone has just tried to kill me.
That's normal.
Ah, but this time that someone thinks he has succeeded. Except for you and me, the whole world believes that I am dead. And in this case, death has its advantages.
Yes, it does. For example, you never have to pay taxes, and you never have to worry about missionaries coming over to your house wanting to help you find Jesus in the sofa cushions. Meanwhile, Dreyfus reports for duty, and it turns out that in addition to being assigned to find out who killed Clouseau, he's also being ordered to give the eulogy at Clouseau's funeral.
You knew him intimately,
I hated him intimately.
but you're the expert who's going to track down his murderers.
I'm the expert who would love to kiss his murderers, don't you understand?
Now, the PR people loved the angle.
Sacrilege! I won't do it.
Politics.
No, I'm a good Catholic.
So is the chief's wife.
I don't care. What's she got to do with it?
She wrote the speech.
But of course, we know Dreyfus will absolutely stand his ground no matter what sort of political pressure.
Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests.
Well, shit. As Dreyfus tries to get through the funeral, things are complicated by Clouseau deciding to attend dressed as a clergyman. It turns out Duvier and his wife are in attendance, and Duvier's wife demands Duvier stop seeing Simone or she'll sue for divorce. Meanwhile, Clouseau decides to let Dreyfus know he's still alive, which causes Dreyfus to faint and fall right into the grave. This is still nowhere as near as funny as Frank Waldman apparently thinks it should be. Duvier meets with his lieutenants and announces that New York was impressed with the apparent assassination of Clouseau, and as such, the Gannett transaction is back on for the next week. Shortly after this, however, Duvier calls off things with Simone, who does not take the news well.
Okay, how long this time?
I'm afraid this time permanently.
Permanently? Permanently?
Yes.
Permanently?
Well, look, she gave me an ultimatum.
An
What could I do?
ultimatum? What do you mean? You're sitting like you don't have any choice in this
Well,
matter.
I have.
Well, you have too. Get rid of her.
Get rid of her?
Yes, get
My
rid of
own
her.
wife?
Your
I
own
can-
wife.
I
Get
can-
rid of her.
I can't do
Out.
that. I can't.
Why can't you do
Well,
that?
she's got enough evidence in her safety deposit box to ruin me, and her attorney has been told that if anything accidental happens to her, to take the contents of the box and give it to the authorities.
Well, then get rid of the authorities.
Get rid of the authorities?
Yes, get rid
What
of
do you
the
think I
authorities. Well, then
am?
get-
Now, you would think that this would mean Simone would have a target painted on her back, and you'd be right. However, Duvier decides not to do anything to her unless she does something indiscreet. And speaking of indiscreet, let's see what Clouseau's up to.
Don't worry, Hedo. It's only an old salty Swedish sea dog out there from the salty seas, you know. Up in the air and in the paratin.
Clouseau meets with an informant who tells him something big is happening at the Club Foot. Yeah, I know, not this movie's best joke. Clouseau expresses his gratitude for the tip, but when the informant implies he wants money for it, Clouseau turns into the greatest troll in the world.
Mine linen in the hand, for the dark and strangers coming in the vulet flow. Keeping the hinden on flowers, neat fluen, got the flern and hörn. Horn in the hin horn, the blue in, the floor.
Later at the club, Simone shows up and mouths off to the owner when he won't give her the table that Duvier usually has reserved. Meanwhile, in the back, Clouseau and Cato try to get into the club in disguise. Naturally, this does not go as planned. Inside the club, a couple of Duvier's goons show up and under cover of strobe lights try to abduct Simone. Fortunately, Clouseau and Cato's latest mishap occurs just in time for them to fall onto the goon and inadvertently rescue her. Simone grabs Clouseau and the two of them head for her apartment.
Well, you know, it's not going to do you much good if you don't take your pants off.
What?
You gotta take your pants off.
And that, friends, was when millions of teenage boys in 1978 were instantly envious of Peter Sellers. Clouseau reveals his identity, and Simone tells him about Duvier really being the head of the French Connection. But before they can get any further, largely because the two of them keep confusing each other about what in the hell they're talking about, the goons show up at the apartment and shoot their way in, forcing Clouseau and Simone to make a hasty exit and into an apartment on the floor below. And guess who just happens to live there?
Stairs waiting in my room.
The other one. How do you know there's another one?
Phillips assassins always travel in pairs. It's a company rule. Do you know what the Gannett transaction is?
The Gannett transaction. What is that?
It's a code name for a 50 million franc heroin sale.
50 million francs?
Yes, Philippe's going to Hong Kong on Tuesday to meet with the American buyer.
Hong Kong.
I don't know how it fits in, but the Gannett's a boat.
Clouseau decides to take Simone and Cato to Hong Kong, and in order to keep Duvier from recognizing Simone, they go to Professor Ball's for some disguises.
Listen, I don't think I can do this.
Of course you can. Of course you can.
Yeah, here's where part of this movie falls down hard. Now, the obvious joke is that the costumes are meant to be stereotypical and transparent. It's obvious that's what they were going for. The problem is that it still comes off as horribly, horribly racist. And while it might have flown back in 1978, in this day and age, it's really not all that funny. But it does give me an opportunity to talk about Clouseau's casual racism toward the Chinese in general, and Cato in particular. Throughout the series, Clouseau is referred to Cato as his little yellow friend. And the joke here is that Clouseau has absolutely no idea that he's being racist. He thinks he's using yellow as an adjective, much as one might use the word black to describe someone of African descent. No one ever calls him on it, and Cato just seems to let it slide. It's still racist, and it's still wrong. But it's racism born out of ignorance rather than hate. So I kind of keep getting the feeling that maybe if somebody had called him on it, Clouseau might have knocked it off with using that term and might have gone with some different disguises. But that never happened in the original film series. More on that in a future episode. While Cato stumbles around thanks to the ridiculous glasses Professor Balls provided and Clouseau helps him, Simone gets them checked into the hotel. Algo arrives and tells the desk clerk to let him know when Mr. Scarlini arrives in the hotel. Clouseau tells Cato to wait 10 minutes, then tell Algo that Scarlini has arrived and bring him up to their room, where Clouseau will disguise himself as Scarlini. Dreyfus arrives in Hong Kong, as does Marchione and the real Scarlini. Cato finds Algo and gets him up to the room, and while Clouseau gets ready, Cato tells Simone that Scarlini's in the room right down the hall. Simone leaves Cato to keep Algo busy while she heads out to prevent Scarlini from contacting Duvier. Fortunately, Clouseau finally has his disguise ready.
Oh, hey, mamma mia. Spaghettino Al Pacino.
Oh my god. I am not even going to talk about this because we'd be here all day. So, basically, Simone keeps Scarlini busy while Algo and Clouseau head down to the lobby to meet Duvier. Unfortunately, Marchione and Scarlini's other bodyguard head down in the same elevator. Meanwhile, Dreyfus arrives at the hotel, and Clouseau once again gives him a minor heart attack by trying to get his attention. Duvier meets up with Clouseau and Algo, but Marchione spots them and gets outside the hotel just after they leave. The bellboy tells them they're going to the Lee Key shipyards. Yes, I know. Moving on. Cato follows Clouseau on a stolen hot dog cart. Marchione calls Scarlini to report what he saw, and Dreyfus finds out where Duvier is going. Scarlini hauls Simone out with him, ending up in the same elevator as Dreyfus. When Dreyfus mentions the shipyard, Scarlini's alerted and gets one of his goons to hold the doors for long enough for the four of them to get into a taxi and delay the police. But we're running out of time, so let's pick up the chase. You know, on second thought, let's not do that. Let's just skip to the end. Clouseau and Duvier arrive at the shipyards, where Duvier reveals that the heroin is concealed in the keel of a yacht called, unsurprisingly, the Gannet. The idea was for Scarlini to buy the boat, sail it for a while, then haul it out of the water and remove the midsection to get the heroin out. However, when Clouseau launches the boat, he falls off the platform, popping his inflatable midsection, and Duvier realizes he's been had. This starts up the chase again, resulting in Duvier's car being stuck on a boat, Dreyfus's car colliding with Scarlini's cab, and Clouseau and Cato in the water. As Clouseau climbs out, Dreyfus spots him and responds in his usual manner. Eventually, everybody ends up inside a warehouse shooting at each other, but it turns out there's an odd bit of cosmic symmetry at work.
Clouseau?
Yes?
Are you wounded?
No! Fortunately, I was saved by the darkness.
So what we need is more light.
And so the gangsters are foiled and arrested. Clouseau is decorated for his work, and the movie ends with Clouseau picking Simone up for an official date.
Oh, yes, absolutely fine. Allow me to let you in the car. Please.
Beautiful.
It's rather neat, isn't it? I call it the Silver Hornet. Yes, service. Yes. It's a little overdue for a service, unfortunately. Perhaps it's better to leave that there.
Well, it's a beautiful night. Why don't we walk?
What an excellent idea. I'm sorry about that.
Yes, it's quite all right.
My goodness, you look ravishing tonight.
Oh, yes, I know that.
You know that?
Oh, yes, I know that.
Yes, I knew that you knew that.
And that's Revenge of the Pink Panther, and honestly, yeah, not that great. Don't get me wrong, the movie is still funny, but compared to the other films in the series, it doesn't really stand out. The heroin smuggling plotline just seems at odds with the usual craziness of the plots of the rest of the movies, and it seems like they're trying too hard to do a satire on the Godfather movies with it. Herbert Lom is tragically wasted on a running gag which isn't particularly funny. Burkwalk is finally given a larger role in things and proves he's just as funny as the other regulars in this series, but in terms of story arc, Kato's ultimately wasted, and frankly you can see that time is catching up with Peter Sellers. By no means is it the worst movie in the series, but in no way is it the best. I couldn't find any solid information on what the budget was for this film, but Revenge of the Pink Panther took in about $43 million at the box office, which was more money than The Pink Panther Strikes Again, so it was most likely another unqualified success. And this apparently inspired Peter Sellers to write his own Pink Panther script that he was perfectly willing to get produced without Blake Edwards even being involved. Romance of the Pink Panther, as it was called, would have essentially served as the finale for the series, as the plotline would have been Clouseau going up against a female jewel thief called the Frog, falling in love with her, and then eventually giving up his life as a policeman to join her in a life of crime. 2 drafts of this script were written, but it wouldn't even make it into the development phase, as sadly Peter Sellers died from heart problems in 1980. However, Blake Edwards was convinced that that didn't necessarily mean the end of the film series. He figured that it might be possible for audiences to move on with future films with a new main character. But he was also savvy enough to realize that in order for audiences to accept a new main character, they were going to have to say goodbye to Clouseau first. But how do you do that when the actor who's played your main character so far is dead, and you know audiences won't accept anyone else in the role? Well, we're going to find out how Blake Edwards accomplished this next time as we follow the trail of the Pink Panther. I'm Aaron Mills. Join me again next time as we continue our look at the legacy of the Pink Panther.